At 80, I've experienced plenty in life, but one choice still weighs heavily on me: moving into a nursing home. At first, it felt like the right decision. My family reassured me that I'd have all the care and comfort I needed. I trusted them. But once I settled in, reality hit hard. Life in a nursing home wasn't what I expected, and the things no one told me beforehand made all the difference. If you're thinking about this option, whether for yourself or a loved one, you might believe it's the safest and most practical choice. Maybe you've been told it will bring ease and security. But before you take that step, I need to share 6 hard truths I wish I had known before making this life-altering decision. Because moving into a nursing home isn't just about convenience, it changes everything. And once you're in, leaving isn't as simple as you might think. Stay with me until the end, because some of these realities might shock you. And if you know someone considering a nursing home, this might be exactly what they need to hear before making a decision they can't undo. Now let's dive in. Regret 1: losing my independence. The biggest shock of moving into a nursing home wasn't the unfamiliar faces, the scheduled meals, or even the sterile environment. It was realizing that my independence had slipped away. Before, I lived life on my terms. I decided when to wake up, what to eat, and how to spend my day. A simple walk outside, a quiet afternoon with a book, or even staying up late watching TV, these were choices I never questioned. But inside the nursing home, I quickly discovered that control over my daily life was no longer mine. Everything ran on a rigid schedule. Breakfast was served whether I was hungry or not. Lights were out at a set time, even if I wasn't ready for bed. Want to step outside for fresh air? You'd better hope someone is available to assist you. Simple choices, what to wear, what to eat, when to move, became luxuries rather than rights. I still remember my first morning there. I woke up, stretched, and reached for my book, only to realize my surroundings weren't familiar. My favorite chair, my carefully chosen belongings, the little things that made my space feel like home, all gone. In their place was a standard issue bed, walls that weren't mine, and a sinking feeling in my chest. I wasn't just in a new place, I was in a system that dictated my every move. The hardest part? Once you lose your independence, getting it back feels nearly impossible. You adapt because you have no choice. You stop asking why meals are the same every day. You learn to accept restrictions even when they don't make sense. And in doing so, you lose a part of yourself. If you're thinking about a nursing home, whether for yourself or a loved one, ask this: are you truly ready to give up the small freedoms that make life feel like your own? Because once they're taken away, you'll realize just how much they meant. Regret 2: feeling forgotten. One of the most painful realizations about nursing home life isn't the routine or the unfamiliar surroundings. It's the slow, quiet way you begin to disappear from the lives of the people you love. When I first moved in, my family promised they'd visit all the time, and for a while they did. My son would drop by after work, my daughter would bring my grandchildren on weekends, and for those first few months, I held on to the feeling that I was still a part of their world. But then, life went on, without me. My son started calling instead of visiting. My daughter's weekend trips turned into occasional check-ins. The grandkids got older, busier, and I stopped being a priority. Holidays were the worst. I'd wait in my room dressed in my best, telling myself they'd be here any minute. But more often than not, the plans would change. A last-minute trip, a sudden work obligation, and "I'm so sorry, we'll come next week" that never actually happened. At first, I told myself not to take it personally. They still loved me. They were just busy. But then I started noticing something. The way my phone barely rang, the way I went from being part of their lives to just an afterthought. One evening, I picked up my phone to call my son, just to hear his voice. But I hesitated. What if I was interrupting? What if he was too busy? What if he answered out of obligation, not because he really wanted to? So I put the phone down, and in that moment, it hit me. This is what happens when you're no longer part of the everyday. Out of sight, out of mind. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you ready for that silence? Because no matter how much your family loves you, once the routine of visits fades, the loneliness settles in. And that's a kind of loss you can't prepare for. If this message resonates with you, comment number 2 below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Now let's continue. You regret 3, losing my sense of purpose. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was simply changing my address. I didn't realize I was leaving behind something far more important, my sense of purpose. Back home, my days had meaning. I had things to take care of, small rituals that kept me grounded. Making my morning coffee, tending to my garden, even folding laundry. These little tasks made me feel useful. But once I entered the nursing home, those responsibilities vanished. Meals were prepared, rooms were cleaned, and suddenly there was nothing left for me to do. At first, I welcomed the idea of a break. No more housework, no more worrying about chores. But then, as the days stretched on, I began to feel something I never expected. Emptiness. I woke up with no real reason to get out of bed. I saw it in the faces of other residents, too. There was a woman named Helen, who once spent her afternoons painting in her sunlit kitchen. Here, she had no space, no supplies, and over time, her hands, once so steady with a brush, remained still in her lap. "I don't even know what to do with myself anymore," she admitted one day. And I understood exactly how she felt. When you no longer have a role to play in your own life, the days lose their color. The mind slows, the body weakens, and you begin to feel like just another person waiting for time to pass. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, what gives your life meaning? Because once you step through those doors, holding on to purpose isn't just about keeping busy, it's about holding on to the reason you wake up each morning. Regret 4, declining health faster than expected. Before moving into a nursing home, I was managing just fine. I wasn't climbing mountains, but I could still take care of myself, go for walks, and cook my own meals. I had routines that kept me moving, grocery shopping, stretching in the mornings, and doing small tasks around the house. I thought I was just staying active. But in reality, I was maintaining my independence without even realizing it. Then I moved in. At first, it felt like a well-earned break. No more cooking, no more cleaning, no more worrying about daily chores. If I needed something, all I had to do was press a button and help would come. It seemed convenient until I noticed what was happening to my body. I was sitting more, moving less. My legs started to feel weaker, my balance wasn't as steady, and getting up from a chair took more effort than before. It didn't happen overnight, but week by week, I could feel myself slowing down. And I wasn't the only one. I watched it happen all around me. People who arrived walking on their own eventually needed a walker. Some who had been active before were now relying on wheelchairs. It wasn't because they suddenly became older or sicker. It was because they stopped using their bodies. I remember Alice, a lively 81-year-old woman who used to walk the halls every day. She swore she'd never let herself slow down. But after a few months of less movement and more assistance, she found herself using a walker, then a wheelchair. One day she sighed and said, "I feel like I've aged 10 years in just a few months." And I knew exactly what she meant. The truth is, the less you move, the harder it becomes to move at all. When everything is done for you, you lose the motivation and the ability to do it yourself. If I had known how quickly my strength would fade, I would have pushed myself to keep moving, to stay active, to resist the temptation of taking it easy. If you're thinking about a nursing home, ask yourself, will you still have the drive to keep your body strong when everything is designed to make life effortless? Because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. Regret 5, the loss of privacy and dignity. Before moving into a nursing home, I never truly appreciated how much my privacy meant to me. At home, I had my own space, a place where I could close the door, sit in silence, and go about my day however I pleased. But once I moved in, I quickly realized that privacy wasn't guaranteed. In fact, it was something I had to sacrifice the moment I walked through the doors. From the very beginning, I felt like I was constantly under watch. Nurses and aides came in and out, checking on me at all hours. Room inspections, shared spaces, scheduled assistance. Suddenly, even the most personal moments weren't entirely my own. Simple acts like getting dressed or using the restroom often required someone else's help, which was hard to accept after a lifetime of independence. I understood that they were just doing their jobs, but that didn't make it any easier to lose control over the small things I once did without a second thought. And then there were the rules. Want to take a shower? You might have to wait for staff availability. Not a fan of what's on the meal plan? There aren't always other options. Even bedtime wasn't entirely up to me. Lights out followed a schedule, not my personal preference. Sharing a room was another challenge. Not everyone gets a private space, and that means adjusting to a stranger's habits, routines, and personality. I was fortunate to have a respectful roommate, but others weren't as lucky. Some dealt with noise, mess, or even difficult behaviors that made restful nights impossible. No matter how much you try to settle in, the reality is clear. This space isn't truly yours. But the hardest part? The loss of dignity. When people knock but don't always wait for a response before entering. When you're addressed like a patient instead of a person. When your choices are dictated by someone else's schedule rather than your own. Over time, you start feeling less like yourself and more like just another resident following the routine. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you ready to give up the privacy and freedom you've always known? Because once it's gone, you may find yourself longing for the simple independence you once took for granted. Regret 6, realizing it's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I convinced myself it was just a trial run. I thought, I'll stay for a while, see how I feel, and if it doesn't work out, I can always leave. But what I didn't realize was how quickly temporary turns into permanent. At first, going back home seemed like an easy option. But my house had been sitting empty for months, and maintaining it from a distance became nearly impossible. My children, thinking they were helping, had already started making decisions, selling off furniture, giving away things they assumed I wouldn't need, even talking about renting the place out. The first time I mentioned moving back, they hesitated. Are you sure? Wouldn't it be safer to stay? What if something happens to you? Suddenly, what was once my decision didn't feel like mine anymore. Then came the physical changes. In the nursing home, everything was designed for convenience. I didn't have to cook, clean, or even walk much. At first, it seemed like a relief, but over time, I noticed I wasn't as strong as before. Tasks that once felt effortless, getting up from a chair, carrying groceries, even walking up a few steps, became harder. The independence I had before moving in was slipping away, and with it, my confidence in being able to manage on my own. I wasn't the only one. I met others who thought they'd stay just for a little while, only to find that leaving was much harder than expected. Some lost the option entirely. Their homes were sold, their savings drained by care costs, and suddenly the choice to go back no longer existed. The hardest truth? Nobody warns you about this. Moving in feels like a decision you can undo, but for most, it isn't. The longer you stay, the harder it is to leave. And one day, the life you had outside starts to feel like a distant dream. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you truly ready for the possibility that once you move in, you might never leave? Because once you cross that threshold, the road back isn't as simple as you might think. Final thoughts. Looking back, I don't regret aging. I regret assuming that moving into a nursing home was the best, or only, path forward. I believed it would offer safety, comfort, and a better quality of life. But what I didn't expect was how much it would take from me. My independence, my privacy, my purpose, and in some ways, even my identity. That's not to say all nursing homes are bad. For some, they provide necessary care. But before you take that step, ask yourself, are you truly ready for what you'll be giving up? Because once you move in, life is never quite the same. If I had a second chance, I would have fought harder to stay in my own home. I would have explored every possible option, seeking home care, adjusting my living situation, and finding ways to maintain my freedom without sacrificing my well-being. And if you're facing this decision, I hope you pause and consider, is this truly the best choice for me, or just the most convenient one right now? Because the life you have, your daily routines, your independence, your ability to decide what happens next, is worth protecting for as long as possible. Thank you for spending your time with us today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share what stood out to you most. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear this message. Your support helps us continue to create content that informs, inspires, and makes a difference. See you in the next video.